Hello folks, this week I'd like to talk about horror show. Yes, horror show that spawned a number of horror tracks. Excuse this, had to be done. It spawned I think the first video where I was wearing a hat and started mucking around with masks. Lord knows, sometimes the music just takes over, and I think it did. Horror is something I was quite into when I was around about 12, 13, buying James Herbert and Pan books and all sorts of things, and suddenly, really getting a lust, if you like, for horror. I just like the adjectives used. I always thought that horror is, I don't know, when it comes to writing, I've always found it's the most expletive. It seems to use more adjectives in its writing than any other sort of storyline. You want to describe, I know, all these horrible things. I noticed a lot of horror writers would kind of do that. They'd usually use one or two adjectives to sort of disgust you. I suppose that's what you had to do if you were trying to visually put the image of your story into people's minds. And of course, in theory today, horror films, they've gone overboard, of course, and all that gore has gone too far. And sort of, on reflection, of course, it makes you think that the best horror films or the best ghost films, haunted house type films, etc., are the ones that don't show you too much and leave things to your imagination. So, why did I do horror show? I think it's because after the first two albums, as I mentioned before, the first album was just a sort of project that sort of give birth, found its own way, and the music was going all over the place. And Power Struggle, of course, had a direction in a way. It was the first sort of concept album, as I mentioned before, sort of focusing on electronic genre. So I thought to myself, with going into making the third album, it seemed very obvious really that I should fall back on something that I really liked when I was young and when I was growing up, and it's something I could still deal with. I'm okay with horror films, horror books, but as I've got older, perhaps in some ways this is going to surprise a lot of people. I've kind of, I think all the ideas, I think a lot of the ideas have run out, and that kind of depresses me to the point where I'm actually watching horror stories where you know what's coming, what's going to happen, and you've seen it all before. Maybe prime example is some of the things I'm doing myself, where I am trying at least to try and think of something original. I mean, who knows in time to come whether or not I'd embark upon trying to make some kind of new conceptual horror film or video or something. I'm not sure. I like playing around with it, but I like a lot of things. Anyway, we're talking about horror show, and the reason it came about was purely because of that. It was something I knew I could fall back on, and creatively I was writing kind of horror stories when I was younger, and knowing I could kind of make visual impressions with music, with the other genres and with the other concepts, I thought horror may actually be quite easy. I'm not saying it was easy, but I don't think it was as much as a challenge as some of the projects that I've come across over time. How long it took me to produce, I'm not sure. I know, like most of the albums, especially the early albums, that once I started embarking upon the project, I was deep into it and spending, 8 hours a day working on it, alongside working a full-time job and stuff, hardly getting any sleep. So I'm looking at the track listings up here, and I have to admit, yet again, I can't really remember the order. you've already got a grasp of how I make my albums, or how I assemble them. They're assembled sometimes as they go, and sometimes at the latter end. I like to sort of piece them together like a jigsaw. So they may not necessarily always come across, be produced, as I said, the tracks in track order. But as the theme starts to develop and the track names start to arrive, and then I start working on them tracks to make them sounds that create the title, then they seem to have a semblance and an order out of all that chaos, I suppose. I do think I did actually start this album with the track Monster, though, believe it or not. A bit pathetic in some ways, because a monster is something that I think we've grown to not accept over time. It's almost like the true monsters, I think, as Stephen King sort of well, I don't know, identified in a lot of his early stories, are human beings. And the monsters such as werewolves and vampires and zombies and so on. Yeah, I got to laugh, but yeah, I kind of knew that this album was going to be kind of a bit, maybe more, certainly more dark, industrial, deep. Lots of noises and lots of creativity. Maybe not following a fluid musical path like the Power Struggle album, as an example. So I did. I started playing around with a lot of noises. In Monster itself, you'll hear a monster, monster noises, growling, and all sorts of stuff. If you listen carefully, that is. And I think I was sort of making the track almost like Frankenstein was making his monster. That's probably the exact way I can put it. Making a track called Monster with bits and bobs to kind of make a semblance of noise that would bring something to life. And I think it was an important track actually to start the album, and even to start the concept, perhaps. I'm looking up here. I've got Dying Flames, but I don't believe Dying Flames was the track I next worked on, or if I did, I really have a feeling Dying Flames, Darkness Descends, yeah, especially these two, might well have been, Fog Rising, all sort of bits of mishmash, like they were all starting simultaneously. I had various ideas going here, going there, and whatnot, and I was kind of creating these noises in this weird sort of I don't know, environments. And sometimes I suppose I haven't really recognised this sometimes, but sometimes I actually make noises, make sounds, and it is the prelude to a track. But over a period of time, it actually does get dispersed. It's great to start the project or start the track, and as it gets going, you realise it's got very little to do with the rest of the track, or it may not hold the attention of the person listening. So sometimes it actually gets cut and scrapped or put to one side. But because it was early days and I was still a fledgling and learning, I think that's exactly what I did. So I'd start things, adapt into the particular track, and then it was basically shoving that to one side, thinking, no, I can't use that, but then actually coming back to it and using it for something else. And Dying Flames, yeah, I'm not 100% sure if it's got anything to do with horror, but I suppose in my mind it was a campfire going out, and then it was going to be dark. My obsession with the whole of this concept really was dark. All traditional stuff. When it's dark, it's creepy. When the fire's going out, is there wolves at bay, etc. Is it good that the fire's going out? But in the same way, it's kind of a somber track as well. But it did fit, and it's certainly, again, its position. is perfect within the start of this particular album. And then, of course, that moves me to Hammer Blows. Now, Hammer Blows, I remember a lot about Hammer Blows, about how I made it, and where it evolved from. And I may have mentioned it before or talked about it in other places. But Hammer Blows, yeah, I was working in a place that was quite frustrating at the time. It was just one of the people I think who still works there actually called it toxic, and that's a great word, because the place was toxic. Um, the company was, for better words, mad, just mad. To endure the many years I worked there, yeah, it takes some. Um, and anyone who works beyond the time I worked there, then they've certainly lost it. And I feel sorry for them. But you go in with 100%, positivity at the threshold of the door, and you step you step over this, you step into this place, you step over the framework into the place, and you'd lost 99% of your energy just by stepping over the threshold into the place, and you I don't know, you were running on nothing, because mentally and physically you were just like, don't know, Twilight Zone, definitely another zone. But I've always had this ability to endure. I don't know how, and I always saw that the customers were the important people. They didn't know the background of the company or anything to do with the company. They just saw it for what it was, and sent jobs in. And I used to get like great pleasure in actually being tasked with some of these complex jobs on occasion, sometimes simple jobs, but always making a very good quality, assured job, and making sure it was to detail. But as I say, there were lots of frustrations, lots of phone calls when you left. You finished work and I don't know. Anyway, this particular morning, it must have been worse than any of the usual. Most days were exactly as I said. You left the place with no energy. I believe this particular morning, more so, I went home feeling kind of wound up, very negative. And I really probably should have just gone to bed, but I didn't. I ended up coming into this room and just wanting to unleash that negativity, if you like, for better words, to just do something with it. It was just like it was within me, just to outpour. And I don't know. I suppose on that morning, putting it into music was probably, because when you look on hindsight, definitely a good outpouring. But Hammer Blows, to this day, was just born of pure negative energy, which goes to show that it can be, if you like. I mean, I'm not saying it's a positive song, but it goes to show that it had a positive reaction, and a vibe and everything about it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to come near making such a track again, purely because I don't think I'm going to ever want to experience being in a negative place such as that place, to have so much of that negative energy inside me to outpour, if you like. But as I say, I don't know if I can fault having it, because if I hadn't had it, then this track wouldn't have been born. And this is the track that sort of did things, progressed the music quite a bit. This is the track that got played on Chris Watts in the Moog show, and Push from the editor of Electronic Sound heard it, identified it and liked it, and I started to realise that I could communicate with people, I suppose, with my music, and it did mean things to other people. At this point, also, I should mention, just because there is a video, the video, obviously, the idea for the video and everything was not at this stage at all. You know, there was no thinking, hang on a minute, I've got to make a video. The track itself was just important at the time, and there you go. You know, it's a tune, a track, piece of music with a powerful name, really, born of pure negative energy. And I suppose when you think about it, for me not to actually elaborate any more than that means that any other form of memory to do with that has dissipated and gone. And I'm not going to, well, I don't, I just literally do not thrive on negative energy at all, or anything negative. I've been it goes. It's like it's not important to me. It's like once it's come through me, and once I can disperse of it, I'll convert it and make it positive. Got to make it positive. There's too much negativity in the world, and it goes to show as well in time. Even if your life goes on weird journeys, you can get out of these places, toxic places. You know, you don't have to stay there. There is life elsewhere, and it's, you know, I never regretted leaving the place at all. So then we move on to fog rising, and I suppose fog rising, as I've already mentioned, was sort of possibly bits and bobs from the Dying Flames and the Darkness Descending tracks. But I know what was forming in my head, of course, the title itself, Fog Rising from the Ground. But it was, I suppose, a nod certainly to John Carpenter and The Fog. Because that film, you know, was key when I was young. You know, I saw Halloween, I saw The Fog, and, you know, his style. Yeah, there was just something about them films, and they're just, you know, gripping, good storytelling, and the tension, you name it. And so, coming back to these audio, visual things I wanted to create, that's what I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to sort of reenact, re-envision this kind of town being swamped in this fog that's rising, and subsequently hear the noises. And that brings me to Lunatic Waltz. Now, there are some that say that there isn't many tracks on this album that really stand out. I mean, it was sort of highlighted in the review for Electronic Sound, which I was fortunate to have. But Lunatic Waltz was possibly even my favourite on this album, actually. It wasn't... I had an idea of this, but again, the title was sort of created halfway through the making of it. And what I liked about this particular track is kind of like, I might have mentioned it before, but it's kind of a three-part track. You know, sometimes I've got these tracks that stay steady and they stay pretty seamless all the way through, with the same sort of tempo and everything. You know, it stays the same way. But this track's a kind of three-tiered track, and this was the first time I think there was some real empathy inside a track. I did keep visualising different things within the making of this track. I envisioned a ballroom scene, on some occasions of something like the Phantom of the Opera, dancing with a woman alone, but then there'd be times where there was lots of individuals on the dance floor, but dancing not to the music, you know, but trying, you know, and small people with tall people and such like, you know. So I had lots of visions making this track, and I don't know, it kept the flow, and perhaps that's why it even changes into three different parts of the song, because my own visions were clouding and changing whilst the making of this song was being made. But I certainly got to the end and was really pleased with what I'd produced. Talk about the same track again. Killer Klowns. I can't see actually. My glasses. It's smeary or something. Killer Klowns. Well, I think it was the period. I'm trying to think. I mean, it's track 2016. I mean, there was a lot of. I don't know if many of you people have ever watched these kind of Killer Clown YouTube videos, but there seems to be quite a spate of these kind of crazy, sick type clown videos appearing, scaring the bejesus out of lots of people. You know, people just walking down paths and following people and pouncing out of lifts and all sorts of things. And there was quite a lot of that going on at the time, and it was quite appealing. And I just thought, you know, again, it appealed to me. It appealed to my dark sense of humour, and I just thought that why not? Clowns do terrify people, and they're certainly a good character for horror. So I embarked upon making a tune with Killer Clowns, and again, I think I hit the nail on the head. And Darkness Descends. I don't. I'll continue, but you already know that these bits emanate from the two previous tracks I mentioned, and it's just a role reversal really of Fog Rising. We've got the Fog Rising, and now we've got Darkness Descending. Pretty obvious things in a way. Yeah, I mean, maybe I was running out of ideas to some degree. I'm not sure, but Darkness Descending isn't a reversal of Fog Rising. It is a different track altogether, darker, etc. But it's like I don't know. I think this was a concept album in the sense it didn't have chapters. It just wanted to identify different areas of things that creep us out. And just have bits in there. So, you know, when we keep hitting these bits or listening to these particular pieces of music, we get them foreboding feelings. Black Petals, a dancey tune type thing, very complex and definitely, well, yeah, I mean, it says it's the longest track, but it was the longest track to make. I spent weeks and weeks perfecting that track to what it became, because I felt it was so important. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process. Well, I'm not 100% sure if I enjoyed the process, and I'm unsure if the neighbours enjoyed the process, because it was, I think it was summertime, certainly summertime. I definitely had the window open, I remember, but I was so pedantic with some bits of it that I just needed to keep bringing the levels up. And even when it went to mastering, the guy mastering the track was losing bits. So it was kind of going backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. You know, I was hell bent on producing this sound that I wanted to. But yeah, probably to this day, the toughest track to get exactly right without being spoilt with the mastering. Decay. Yeah, I think I'm starting to get there now. I think I've got the semblance of the. I keep using that word. Sorry, but I think I got to the point now where I'd actually started to find a structure for the album, and oddly enough, towards the end, and I think I'm right in saying that probably towards the end here, the way the tracks are petering out, they were done in this latter order. And Decay, I think I was starting to feel, yeah, hang on, yeah, we need some of this. This is important. You know, this is something that's horrific. You know, a dead body decomposing, or you know, a building crumbling down, or something. You know, so, again, it's negative, but it's something that's definitely within horror. And I quite enjoyed that track. It's got its place, I think, and that's hence why I even made a little video towards that. But it is a bit choppy, so I know it's a bit difficult to watch, and I'll say no more. Now, Doorway to Hell. I don't know, I mean, Push mentioned something about comedic or cartoony, I think, in his review about this album. I'm not sure he was reflecting upon this particular track. I mean, these footsteps walking towards a door and a door opening, and then an abundance of all sorts of things happening. Very theatrical track. But again, you know, it's like, if you think you've got the ability to do something, then why not try? And I did, and it just ran away. However, yeah, well, not a lot of people know this. The track, as it stands, is, if I can word this correctly, the footsteps and the doorway was actually at the end of the track when I first put the track together, and it just didn't sound right. It didn't sound like there was a proper lead to the beginning of the track, which sounds kind of crazy, but there seemed to be the build up, and then the footsteps and door and everything at the end seemed to make sense to some degree, that that's where you're going, but it didn't really work. And yet all I did was extract these footsteps in the door from the back end to the front, and it changed the whole concept of the whole thing, just like that almost. And I don't know, yeah, very odd, very odd. Again, you know, it's if you've got the ability to make music and recognise where things aren't working, and you've got the ability to adapt where you think you may have had the concept or the ability to do something, and then it doesn't work, but actually to listen and then think, well, hang on, if we do this or do that, and as I say, it's exactly what I did, and it just fell into place. Bizarre. It is the only track to this day that I've done that though. And again, maybe it's because of experience or knowledge, because it is a very strange thing to do, to make a track back to front. There you go. Now, I'm quite pleased about talking about Infected, because to this day I don't think I've ever heard anything like it. I honestly don't think I've ever heard anything like it. And I was really proud of it, actually. I don't know if this is one of them tracks that went under the radar, and I know this is before viruses, etc. And of course, being infected is sort of similar thing. Maybe not so topical at the moment, I'm not sure. But I really wanted to kind of have this. Yeah, I mean, once I got this kind of creation, this vibe, these weird, strange noises going, it just bloomed, and I couldn't get enough, because I just thought this is just absolutely crazy. But it's to kind of pull off something where you just think, I've created something that no one ever created before. That is, well, I don't even care if it's under the radar. This now will discuss that particular track, and maybe people who've never got that far into the album, or just avoided it or not listened to it or whatever, maybe they'll be curious about what I'm talking about. But it's just got something special about it, and I even to this day, if I listen to it, I do enjoy it. Now, They're Coming to Get You, that's pretty obvious. I hadn't mentioned anything about zombies on this album, and I have to admit, Zombie Flesh Eaters was one of the first horror films I saw as a kid, about 15 or something, and I'd never seen special effects like it, and I have to admit, as I said earlier on, as time goes by, you don't like to see gore, but to think you're watching a film where these things occurred and you saw them, it was just like, it just blew me away that, you know, well, it creeped me out, and it blew me away simultaneously, that these people were acting but having things going through their eyes, and you know. And I ended up watching. Must have been a strange kid, because I ended up watching that film every single day of the first week that I was allowed to watch it. I watched it, you know, religiously on the Monday to Tuesday, Wednesday. I must have had a half-term holiday at school or something. But I watched it every single day. Bizarre. But of course, They're Coming to Get You from Night of the Living Dead. I couldn't be obvious. I didn't, and a good job I didn't call it Zombie, because that would come later. Uh, as you may know, in a different album. Um, but again, that's something about me. Sometimes I'm a bit sly when it comes to tracks. Maybe I'm not always obvious when it comes to track naming, and I just thought that if I called it Zombie, it may just sound a bit, lame. Whereas They're Coming to Get You hopefully sparks an indication, and that's exactly what it is. Actually, I mean, again, I don't know how people listen to this music, to be honest, or what their takes are. I don't get that much feedback. I get a lot more feedback to the videos rather than the albums or the tracks. But if you listen to They're Coming to Get You, I mean, it really is a kind of the imaginations of, if you can imagine a horde of zombies coming your way. They're building, they're growing, they're coming from every direction, and you're just on the run. And that is what the track is, and it's kind of terrifying in some ways. And that was going to conclude the album, and then I noticed I'd actually tallied the tracks up and had 12 tracks, and then I actually asked a few people I knew, should I do a 13th track, because it's a horror album, which everyone was like, well, of course you should. And I thought, well, I suppose the obvious thing to do then is call it 13. And people listening to that particular track will get the Friday the 13th, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all the usual suspects of horror, all sort of thrown into the caboodle of that track. I mean, it's a mishmash of every sort of horror thing going on, to be honest with you. Probably didn't concentrate too much on that in that sense. I'm not sure if that's a sad thing, but of course I did want to complete the album. I felt very enthusiastic about getting the album finished and out there, because I just wanted people to hear some of these tracks. And that really rounds up that particular album and its history, apart from, I suppose, which I should mention, the fact that I did obviously get inspired to make a video of Hammer Blows. I'd worked with Nikolai Kornum previously with Martin Daniels on a few of his films, and I knew Nikolai had an eye for detail, and I just recognised, very shortly after the album was released, that I just felt like I needed to make a music video, and Hammer Blows just seemed to be the obvious choice. And I would decree that I only had about 20% input into the idea of the making of that video. All I saw was someone pounding away with hammers. Didn't really see anything. I didn't even have a story, which is a bit odd for me because I usually do. But maybe it was because it was distorted and blurred through the negativity of the making of it in the first place, like I mentioned before. It just felt obvious to make a video. Hadn't a clue what about, apart from hammers. Unfortunately, Nikolai, knowing he obviously likes horror anyway, just had this formula and this idea. He came down to my home. We checked out a few locations. The churchyard just about half a mile up the road from where I live. Definitely ideal. It's slightly changed now, but definitely ideal for the visuals and the effects. And he came up with about 80% for sure of that video, and he of course made it more of a music video as well than latter videos that I've obviously made. That became a slight success of its own too. To this day it's still got a lot of views, and it's still getting watched these days, and people comment and so on and so on. As per everything I think I've done, sometimes the things just seem to fall into place. That's uncanny in its own way. It's almost like I was born to do this. And of course, I've evolved, and these albums have been made. So there you go, basically. In a nutshell, that is Horror Show. So until the next album, take care, people. Bye bye for now, and thanks for watching.